Wir sind im Mastering 1 der Wesselord Studios und bei uns ist die Darcy und die wird uns ein bisschen mal erzählen, welches Equipment hier sie einsetzt und warum sie es einsetzt. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, let's talk about all the great stuff you have here. You have one of, I think they haven't built more than 80 MMC1s SPL. You are working with one of them every day.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to say I am, yes.
What makes the MMC1 so special?
I can only describe it maybe as, in American terms, the Cadillac of mastering consoles. It's essentially a very simple device. A mastering console is not quite so flashy or complicated as the big desks that you see for mixing and that kind of thing. But it's very important that it only does what you want it to do and nothing else, which is kind of a stupid way to describe such a beautiful device. But what it does, it's got beautiful gain stages and a wonderful, easy working interface for monitor selection and source selection and that kind of thing. But it doesn't introduce noise and distortion and any of the side effects that you really don't want to have when you're working on somebody's record. I've never been able to crack the console up in terms of pushing it to its limits. I don't aim to do that either. That's not part of my goal in mastering. But I can only say that it's beautiful in its simplicity. It's a huge device, and that has to do with all of the technology that actually makes it as clean and simple and beautiful as it is. But it's the one tool that I really couldn't live without. The one thing I would really like to have, and was sort of the anchor for this room when we were talking about how we were going to develop this room and what we were going to make it into. An example of, I think, a good example of how something simple can make the life of a mastering engineer so much easier. When in the studio where I worked previously, they had this console but without the insert box. So no big deal. The gain stages were the same. The way the console functions was exactly the same. A wonderful piece of gear and no complaints. So when it came to deciding whether or not to have the insert box on this console, I thought, well, we have to weigh the money versus the inconvenience of just having to walk around behind the rack and repatch things. Eventually, we decided that we were going to go for the full model, the deluxe model, and I have to say, it took me about 5 minutes of sitting there and being able to resequence my analog gear and being able to A/B, one signal path versus another and that kind of thing. And I thought, I don't know how I've ever lived without this thing. So, and I think that in a way sort of describes the whole console. It's a very simple device to operate and a very complicated and highly specialized device to build, and because all of the signal that all of the music that I work on, we shouldn't call it signal at this point. It's somebody's creative efforts, because all of somebody's music runs through this console before it goes anywhere else, and before it eventually makes it out to the listener. The fact that this is so sort of sonically invisible and reliable and of such good quality makes all the difference.
Let's talk about the gear you use. I see a lot of EQ here.
Well, it looks like a lot of EQ, but that's because I do work in surround. So you see here the 3 units of the SPL PQ, but that is not to stack them all on top of each other, because that's generally not necessary. It's quite a powerful device, but so that I can do 6 channels of EQ, and in mastering, essentially, we have a very basic set of tools to work with. We get stereo mixes or surround mixes, and then we have to, in some ways, shift the focus or fine-tune the focus of what we've received, but we can't go back so far as to taking individual tracks and rebalance, or we hope not to have to in the mastering process. ideally that's been taken care of in the mix process. But we do have to fine tune and adjust what we have. But we only have sort of a limited number of kinds of tools to do that with. So equalization is one of the tools that we have. Compression is another. Limiting is another. There are all kinds of digital processing that we can use these days. But essentially, it comes down to being some type of EQ compressor, limiter, maybe an MS kind of device. But at the core of it all, it's a very basic sort of set of kinds of tools that we can use in the mastering process. You have a selection of EQs that you can choose, but EQ is one of the few things that you can do to something that's already been mixed to have an effect on how it feels to the listener. The SPL PQ is sort of my basic equalizer. It is the thing I use. I can't remember the last time I mastered a track, a record, an album, that I didn't run it through the PQ. There's usually something I can do in the EQ aspects of a track to enhance what the message is of the track. And again, as with the console, if you're going to run somebody's music through a device, you want to be sure that device is of the highest quality. And because of the 120 volt technology, one of the beautiful things with the PQ is the headroom that it has. And EQ is a pretty simple device. There's not too many tricks or lights or buzzers or anything that you can do with it. You adjust frequency bands, and that's more or less it. But the quality of the signal path and the fact that there's so much headroom in it makes it very easy to work with. As an example, if there is something that I think is really special about a track and I'm trying to bring that out, maybe there's a place where the Hammond organ really enhances some emotional nuance in a vocal or what have you, and I want to bring that forward just a little bit so that the listener can really feel that they get carried by that emotion. Then on the PQ, I might go searching for where exactly is that frequency. Now, you would never print it that way, but when you're looking for something, when you're trying to find exactly where something is, there's a tendency to sort of crank it up a bit, shall we say. And, I find myself accidentally with the PQ, as I'm sweeping for frequencies to find just that right place, that I'm suddenly adding 10 dB of this particular frequency, and I find the spot that I'm looking for. And in the end, maybe I add only a half dB. But in the moment that I'm looking for it, it's bliss to be able to push something that far to really find exactly what it is that you're looking for without hearing it turn into a garbled bunch of distorted mess. And that is a feature of this EQ that I haven't encountered with any other EQ that I have used. In the end, in mastering, we tend to be very conservative with EQ. Half dBs and dB increments are sort of standard numbers that we're looking at. But how you get there and the ability to get there and the ability to do something extreme when the material makes it necessary is the luxury that you have with such a device.
Okay, thank you very much, Darcy.